What happens when you stop being a tourist in Malaysia? No luxury hotel, no rooftop infinity pool, no expensive restaurants, no private driver. For 7 days, I want to forget everything I know about traveling and live as close as possible to the everyday Malaysian experience. And I'm not just going to show you the cheap side of Malaysia, I'm going to find out what ordinary life actually feels like when you use local food, local transport, neighborhood shops, and the routines that millions of Malaysians follow every day. If you're watching from Malaysia, help me with something before we start. Type Malaysia Boleh in the comments below. I want to know how many Malaysians are watching, and if you enjoy discovering the real stories behind countries, subscribe to Nomad Quest, because this channel is about going beyond the postcard. Assalamu alaikum. Day 1 begins with a simple rule: no tourist attractions. That means no Petronas Towers, no expensive hotel breakfast, and no carefully planned itinerary. Instead, I'm starting where everyday life starts for millions of people, in a neighborhood. And the first thing I notice is that Malaysia isn't nearly as expensive as the stereotype of a modern capital city might suggest. But I also don't want to fall into the opposite trap and pretend everything is unbelievably cheap. Malaysia has become more expensive. The Department of Statistics Malaysia reported that average household consumption expenditure increased from RM 5,150 per month in 2022 to RM 5,566 in 2024. For one-person households, the average monthly consumption expenditure was RM 3,676 in 2024. So this isn't a fantasy where everything costs a few ringgit. The real story is more interesting. It's about what Malaysians get for what they spend. And breakfast gives me the first clue. Instead of walking into a tourist cafe, I find a local restaurant and order something simple. Roti canai, teh tarik, maybe some nasi lemak later. The table isn't fancy. The chairs aren't designed for Instagram. Nobody is trying to impress anybody. But the food arrives hot, fast, and full of flavor. And suddenly I understand something. In Malaysia, eating out isn't necessarily a special event. It's part of everyday life. The official expenditure data backs up just how important food and restaurants are. In 2024, Malaysian households spent an average of RM 876 a month on food and beverages and RM 948 on restaurants and accommodation services. And that makes sense when you walk through the streets. Food isn't just something you consume. It's where people meet. It's where conversations happen. It's where families reconnect. It's where friends can sit for hours without needing an expensive night out. By the afternoon, I'm heading toward public transport. And this is where my tourist mindset really starts disappearing. Instead of taking a taxi everywhere, I use the MRT and LRT. I tap in, follow the crowd, find a seat when I can, and suddenly, I'm surrounded by students, office workers, parents, and people heading home. Nobody is taking pictures. Nobody is staring at the skyline. They're just commuting. And that's when Kuala Lumpur looks completely different. From the outside, you see skyscrapers. From inside the train, you see a city. A young student scrolling through her phone. A businessman answering messages. A mother holding her child's hand. Someone half asleep after a long day at work. This is the Malaysia tourists rarely film. And if you're enjoying this kind of journey, subscribe to Nomad Quest, because we're not here just to show you beautiful places. We're here to understand how people actually live. By evening, I have another decision to make. Do I go somewhere famous? I follow the locals, and that takes me to a Mamak restaurant. If you've never experienced Malaysian Mamak culture, imagine walking into a restaurant late at night and finding it still full of people. Friends are watching football. Someone is ordering another plate of roti. Teh tarik is being poured from one metal cup into another, creating that familiar stream of frothy tea. Nobody seems interested in leaving. And I start wondering how many travelers spend thousands of dollars looking for an authentic Malaysian experience when something this authentic is happening every night. Day 2 is where the experiment gets harder. I decide to shop for groceries, like someone actually living here. No imported luxury products. No expensive Western supermarket haul. Just everyday essentials. Rice, eggs, vegetables, fruit, drinks, basic household items. And this is where I learn another important lesson. There isn't one cost of living in Malaysia. There are many. Where you live matters. What you eat matters. Whether you cook matters. Whether you use public transport matters. And whether you want a luxury lifestyle matters even more. According to Malaysia's 2024 cost of living data, Kuala Lumpur is used as the reference point for comparing decent living expenditure across locations. For a single-person household, Selangor had an index of 92.0 compared with Kuala Lumpur's 100, while Kelantan and Sarawak were both at 53.7. In other words, Malaysia isn't one giant price tag. The experience changes dramatically depending on where you choose to live. And that becomes one of the biggest surprises of this entire 7-day experiment. Day 3 takes me outside the center of Kuala Lumpur. I want to see what happens when you stop chasing the famous districts. The skyscrapers begin disappearing. Apartment blocks replace luxury hotels. Small restaurants replace international chains. Motorbikes move through neighborhood streets. Children are coming home from school. And suddenly, Malaysia feels less like a destination and more like a home. This is the part tourists often miss. A country isn't only its landmarks. It's the places where people buy bread, the streets where children grow up, the cafes where workers stop after work, the apartment buildings where families spend their evenings, the local markets that don't need a tourism campaign, and the conversations that never make it into a travel brochure. Day 4 is about something even more important: time. I start noticing how much of daily life happens around food. A quick breakfast becomes a conversation. Lunch becomes a gathering. Dinner becomes an event. And late-night food becomes almost a second dinner. Then I realize something uncomfortable. In many expensive cities around the world, people earn more money but have less time to enjoy the things that money is supposed to provide. Malaysia doesn't solve that problem completely. Traffic can be frustrating. Housing costs are rising. And Malaysians themselves are dealing with the same economic pressures affecting households everywhere. But the country's comparatively moderate inflation in recent years shows that prices haven't been exploding at the same rate seen during some of the worst global inflation shocks. Malaysia's annual inflation rate was 1.8% in 2024. And that's when the experiment starts becoming less about money. It's about lifestyle. Day 5 takes me to a shopping mall. Now, that might sound ridiculous, but Malaysian malls are fascinating. You can walk into a huge modern complex and find international brands, local restaurants, cinemas, supermarkets, cafes, electronic stores, gyms, and families spending an entire afternoon together. Then you step outside, and 5 minutes later, you're eating at a tiny neighborhood stall. Modern Malaysia and traditional Malaysia aren't always separated. Sometimes they're sitting next to each other. That's one of the country's strangest strengths. And then there's technology. QR payments are everywhere. Mobile internet is part of daily life. People order food from their phones, book rides digitally, pay bills online, and move through cities using apps. Malaysia isn't choosing between traditional and modern, it's blending them. Day 6 is when I stop trying to find something impressive. Instead, I look for something meaningful. I sit somewhere ordinary. I watch people. And I think about what I expected Malaysia to be before this experiment began. I expected affordability. I expected good food. I expected modern cities. What I didn't expect was how quickly the ordinary would become interesting. A morning market, a crowded train, a conversation over coffee, a plate of noodles, a family eating dinner. None of these things would make a tourist brochure, but together, they tell you more about a country than 100 photographs of a skyline. And then comes day 7. My final day. I go back to the same kind of place where I started. A local neighborhood. No itinerary. No tourist checklist. Just everyday Malaysia. And this is where it gets really interesting. After 7 days, I realize I didn't fall in love with Malaysia because it was cheap. That would be too simple. I started understanding why people like living here, because everyday life can feel accessible. The food is close. The cities are connected. Different cultures exist side by side. Modern infrastructure sits alongside traditional neighborhoods. And you can move from a world-class business district to a local restaurant without crossing some invisible border between two different countries. Malaysia isn't perfect. It isn't the cheapest country in Asia, and calling it easy for everyone would be dishonest. The country's own statistics show that housing, food, restaurants, and transport make up major portions of household spending. In 2024, those four categories together represented about 2/3 of Malaysian household consumption expenditure. But that's precisely why this experiment mattered. I wasn't trying to prove that Malaysia is paradise. I wanted to discover what happens when you stop traveling through a country and start paying attention to how people actually live. And after 7 days, my biggest discovery wasn't a landmark. It wasn't a hidden beach. It wasn't even the food. It was the realization that sometimes the most interesting country is the one you stop looking at like a tourist. Because once the cameras disappear, the attractions close, and the itinerary ends, you finally get to see what a country really is. And Malaysia, I discovered, isn't just a place to visit. For many people, it's a place to build a life. If you enjoyed this journey, subscribe to Nomad Quest, because there are many more sides of Malaysia that we haven't explored yet. And now I want to hear from you. If you are Malaysian, what part of everyday life do you think foreigners completely misunderstand? And if you visited Malaysia, what was the moment that made you think, I could actually live here? Tell me in the comments. Because maybe the best way to understand Malaysia isn't to ask what tourists come here to see. Maybe it's to ask what Malaysians themselves don't want to leave behind.